here's when he said to me, what we're going to do is we're going to build a port, and then the tenements are here, and then we're going to build a railway line, and we're going to link them up. We're going to sell the iron ore. And I went, all right. And how much is that going to cost? And he said, about $2 billion. And I just went, oh my God.
I laid out a map of the Pilbara, and I drew on it in a text of where the railway line was going to go and where the port was going to go, and where I thought we could find ore bodies. And he said, how much do you think this is going to cost? And I said, between 2 and 3 billion. And our market value was about $6 million, $5 million. He just shook his head and he said, does Nicola know anything about this? I said, yeah, she thinks I'm nuts, but we're going to have a crack.
And he said, I've got an idea. Would you like a glass of scotch? And we each had a glass of scotch each. And he said, I've got this idea about starting an iron ore business. Would you like to be part of it? And I said, sounds great to me. He said, and this was the first time I remember, he said, I also like people working with me to have skin in the game. I said, I don't have much skin at the moment. I've only got $80,000. He said, I'll take it.
My very first meeting with Andrew was at his house, in his study in Cottesloe. And I can remember him laying out his vision for what was then Fortescue Metals. In fact, I don't think it had been named Fortescue Metals at that stage. So there's Graham, Andrew and myself. And I think what got Andrew over the line with myself is we was talking about 15 million tonnes. And we'd done Yandi and Marandoo for Rio, and they were about that order. And it did appear to me that at that stage, all of them were looking, it was too small. The tonnage was too small. So I mentioned to Andrew that, in fact, 15 million tonnes I didn't think was doable, but if he was prepared to do 30 plus, we could have a look at it. And I think that was it for Andrew. He more or less jumped over the table.
A few friends of mine were very questioning when I told them that I'd taken on the job. They said, are you really sure you want to associate yourself with Andrew Forrest? He is on the nose. And I guess that was the common view, that Andrew was a little wild, if not a cowboy.
Tonight on Four Corners, Anaconda's big gamble.
What do you think is a fair price for Anaconda stock today?
1 cent.
Andrew, in my opinion, has left a bit of his heart on his sleeve, but also, I think, quite a bit of personal family fortune in the desert. If that plant had have ramped up, if that plant had have operated at something like its capacity, today Andrew would be seen in a completely different light. But it didn't, and it's a failure. And as such, Andrew has withdrawn. Although one thing I'd say about Andrew is you write him off at your peril.
I think he learned a lot from it, and I don't think he's no longer wounded, but I think that's probably the bravest thing he's done, is to stand up and, the country saying, get back in the saddle. For when he decided to do Fortescue, to go back into the limelight after he'd been vilified like that, I think was incredibly brave.
Anaconda, quite simply, was a remarkable education. I mean, it taught me cynically that the bigger the numbers become, the more powerful are the interests to act indecently or act purely for business and not for moral or social sensibility or for a grounding of values. It really emphasised what I believed was that leadership was key, that teamwork was a function of membership and leadership. And if you could get that right, and particularly strengthen the membership, then you could really make anything successful.
There were some areas that could be turned into something that was saleable, that there wasn't sufficient tonnes to support this major Newport rail mine development, and it got to a crunch point, and I basically had to tell Andrew that he'd been, what he had was, some words might say been sold a pup, or other words might say it was not going to deliver the cash he needed for his project.
This is outrageous, you know. There's nothing here in what we're drilling. In our results, there is nothing. I mean, hence Mount Nicholas is still not part of a resource anywhere. You know, it's a couple 100 million tonnes at, 49%. And we had to build at that time, we believed it was $1.85 billion infrastructure play. You can't fund that with a whole heap of shale. And we were saying to the geologists, how do you tell the difference between shale and the iron ore? Because this stuff here is like shaly iron ore, and that stuff's, iron-rich shale. And they said, well, realistically, we can't tell the difference.
Having told the geologists that they really were flogging a dead horse, they immediately started getting the papers looking for jobs. I then had to go back and report to Graham Roll and Andrew, particularly Andrew. And I still remember everyone poked me into his room and they all disappeared. You couldn't see anyone in the office. They all disappeared. They're all hiding in the desks.
We didn't think, because it was a dog, that there wasn't good stuff around the corner, so we just kept looking. What we did in those early days, we had geos who were good rock chippers, who understood where to look and how to read the country. And we were all confident that the iron ore was there. We just had to sort out where it was and find it.
The next mission impossible was to get money, prepayment from a customer. Imagine you got nothing there to sell. You got no iron ore. You got no infrastructure. And you want money from the customer now to come with the contract.
But it was tough. I mean, Andrew was asking us to go, and particularly Dave Liu, who did it. I mean, he asked Dave Liu to go off and get prepaid contracts for an ore body that we hadn't proved up yet. And that's, $20 million or whatever, it was something like that. Well, what are we signing up for? Well, we haven't actually got that yet, but can you prepay? And he did it. A magnificent effort. That's why I'm saying we changed the rules of business. I mean, Andrew drove that process.
David Liu is the guy who, with fortitude, who personifies courage, and would go into these steel mills or ring these people up who wouldn't take a call normally from a little twerp, which is how they would have seen him. But he'd ring them up with authority in his voice, representing Fortescue, and speak with such courage about what we were going to achieve when it was just a game plan. It was just even simply a vision.
David Liu and myself knew that we had to lock these people in to long-term agreements, or we couldn't finance the company. And so we, in some cases, we just sat in the lobby until they'd see us. Well, we have one example, and I won't mention who the steel mill is because they're a customer of Fortescue now, but at the time we got to see a cleaner who was the only person around who'd come and see us.
Rio and BHP had been up there and seen the president of Bow Steel, someone very high up, over the previous weeks, and said their opening statements was, whatever Fortescue says, don't believe them. And the president went, I don't even know who Fortescue are, so we better get them in. So they actually got us through the door at Bow Steel.
And gradually, once we got one or two decent-sized steel mills as our customers, the resistance started to fall away, and all of a sudden they came in a cascade.
So I wouldn't have anyone up there who didn't really believe in what we were doing, and I wouldn't have anyone up there who didn't assume that we were going to be successful. Come hell or high water, we were going to find the ore somewhere. It was just non-negotiable. And everyone was empowered with that vision.
The only positive thing that I actually found was that there was presence of this material called microplatey hematite, very fine plates of hematite in the mineralisation, and the only bits that were any good, which were too small, had this material in it. And that was actually a major discovery because it was not expected. This material is the premium grade product in the central part of the Pilbara, which built the Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton. Their whole operations were around this material. And even to this day, that material is in very short supply worldwide. It's the premium material. Unfortunately, Andrew had teaspoons of it.
And then we noticed it again in some drill samples which we'd put in Wildcat at a new place called Christmas Creek. And we surmised that there was a chance that these two ore bodies could connect up or be associated with each other, in which case they wouldn't be steeply plunging ore bodies as we knew them then. It'd be a large flat sheet, which was a radical new way of thinking.
That bit's a bit on the hard side to get off. Here we are. This is a beautiful piece here.
Most of the BHP and Rio Tinto geologists believe that from the outcrop, 200, 300, 400 metres from the outcrop, that was the end of any potential mineralisation. And I realised that a long time earlier that was just their version of the world and not to be blinkered by that. So, I remember sitting down with the geologist saying, look, drill as far out as you can away from the outcrop. I said, the worst grade will be the outcrop. Get further away as you can.
I pushed the geo who was looking after the RC rig that I had there to go and drill further out. And he told me there's no way you'll ever find iron ore out there. Iron ore's in hills. You never find it undercover, so to speak. So it's not worth doing. And he flat out refused to drill anywhere out, undercover. So I just disregarded him. I told the drillers, just keep drilling until you hit black stuff. So at that point, we're either going to go broke or we're going to do something different. On the 13th or 14th hole, we hit one of the biggest intersections the company has still ever made. We got about 50 metres at just under 60% iron, 4 kilometres away from the hill.
To me, that was one of the most important pieces of the jigsaw puzzle of making the geological model for the Chichester Range. One of the sayings I've developed in geology over the years is with Mother Nature, she doesn't try to trick you or conspire, but once is a fluke, twice is coincidence, 3 times is serial. Now, remember, we're exploring over hundreds of kilometres of strike, and the importance of those holes that David Mendelowitz drilled way over here in the east were invaluable to me because I could see, well, Mendo was over here and he's gone out undercover and he's drilled some holes. And I can see some historic data over here, 200 kilometres away, same range, same type of rocks, dipping same way in a similar way. Well, there's a bit of ore under there. And then we had some tenements that weren't granted. So we got one of the station owners to drill some water bores.
We had an old pastoralist who hated the mining industry. His experience was with big companies. His name was Kennedy. The two Kennedy brothers were famous. They used to get around with pistols on their hips, and they took no cheek nor prisoners. And they had a serious distrust for the mining industry. I happen to know them because I was from the pastoral industry. And I said, listen, Digger, get out into that country and drill a water borehole, and I'll pay for it. And if you find water, you can have all the water you want. And he said, what do I do with the rest of the stuff? And he said, you let us test it. We assayed the samples and we picked up traces of microplatey again, and that's when we thought, we have a sheet on our hands, a huge sheet of iron ore.
As soon as the southern tenement had been granted, the geologists were in there quicker than anyone could possibly blink, and it didn't take more than a week or two. They got some assays the guys told me the good news. So after that, I said, just drill away, drill away.
People who are responsible for the finding of Cloudbreak and Christmas Creek were every single person who was employed up until that time. You need people to peg the tenements. You know, they don't go out in the bush. If you don't have the tenements, you're not going to find it. You need people to raise the money. You need people to look after the drill rigs. You need people to make the maps. So was there any one person or any group of people that found Cloudbreak Christmas Creek? Yeah, it was every single person who was at Fortescue at the time of the discovery.
In a word, yes, they had the media seduced, and they were accepting of everything that Rio and BHP had. So particularly with the open-cut mining method, Rio, even though Rio had conducted studies, and even though Rio had recognised that this was a legitimate and potentially new mining method, Rio and BHP were on the other side of the door saying to media, it will never work, and this guy's a young upstart. You know what he's done at Anaconda. It'll never happen. And if anyone invests in it, they'll lose their money.
They had a nice, cosy little club, duopoly, in the Pilbara, and they saw China growing quickly, and this was a fantastic opportunity for them. You know, along comes a little upstart who thinks that they can enter this game, and they made it as hard as they possibly could for us.
The impact was that they were putting things directly to the media, and particularly they were influencing all the analysts and investors. This stuff was low grade, waste. Quote, you probably heard the quote, no more than a pile of rusty nails.
I actually went and saw the chairman of BHP very early in my directorship, and I said to him that we could both save a lot of money by sharing facilities and working together. And he said, quite frankly, I've never heard of your company, but leave it with me. I'll talk to the staff about it, and I'll give you a ring in a couple of weeks, Herb. Well, that's 10 years ago, and I still haven't heard from him.
I think all that criticism just galvanised the team to prove them wrong. The more they threw at us, the more we'd regroup, make sure we got our facts right, make sure that we got everything right, and come back fighting. You know, it enormously energised the team. We were going to prove them wrong.
There was nobody telling the good story about it except us. Yeah, everyone else was quite happy to tell the negative side of the story. So it was our job to tell the positive side because we were the only ones doing it.
One thing about adversity for us is that it binds the team together in a stronger way than they were before the adversity. And it's almost like a self-defeating process if there is some form of conspiracy out there, because all they did was make us stronger.
Well, in their endeavours to do us harm, they failed to understand the basics of what the capital coming out of China meant. You know, I mean, if they'd embraced us a little more, we wouldn't be what we are now. We'd be a little 20 million tonne per annum producer begging for space on their infrastructure. But by choosing to block us, they forced us to become their nemesis.
Horrified. Golly, Jane was barely 9 months old. She wasn't even 9 months old. So it was a shock to the system. That's when it was suggested that in this day and age there was a pill for such a thing. But anyhow, I had a routine. I had a mare that I used to ride bareback up across the sandhills to the shearing shed once a day for 7 days. That obviously didn't have any effect except to make me a bit stiff and sore. The next thing was to jump off what we used to call the tennis court, the roof that overlooked the tennis court, obviously, but onto the tennis court. And I did that 3 times a day for 7 days, and that didn't work. The gin bottle and the hot bath, that was in the too hard basket. By that time, we were resigned to our fate. So you can see Andrew, had to be tenacious to be still there.
You did.
We were mustering cattle, and this great big old bull had been fighting with another bull, a younger bull, and the younger bull had pushed this very valuable old gentleman down into a river gully. This old boy said, "What do you reckon, young fella? You get down there and have a go." And he was, of course, setting me a target which was beyond what I believed was reasonable at all, beyond what I believed I could achieve. But he was setting me this target, and he was mindful that there was a plan A, which was getting this bull out, and a plan B is that I was skinny and small enough to get out under these tree roots before the bull charged quickly enough to get me. And so we had the plan A and plan B in place, and that's something which is very much part of Fortescue's culture now, to really go for a very brave plan A. Be innovative as you like, good common sense for sure. You've got to have absolute theory which works behind the practical action you're going to take on your brave and your innovative plan A. But by hell, have a bulletproof plan B if plan A doesn't work. So I climbed down with this stock whip, and this great big old bull faced me with his nostrils snorting and, you know, ears cocked forward and starting to paw the ground, and I was able, enough space in that big old gully, to crack the stock whip, and, you know, it cracked just in front of his nose, and with that he snorted and turned and moved up towards the end of the gully, and I ran up to him and gave him another crack on the bum, and the old bull got such a fright that he climbed out of that gully on his knees and scrabbling up, but he was able to climb out and get out, and of course bolted off into the scrub. Victory was ours, and I climbed down. I just couldn't believe what had happened. I'd actually achieved what I believed was impossible. And this old boy rode up in his horse and piled off and just put his arm around me and said, "You've done a man's job today, young man. You've done a man's job." And ruffled my hair a bit, and I just felt like I was 22 feet tall. And in that moment, I learned the power of encouragement was 10 times at least more than the power of criticism. Criticism might adjust behaviour a little, but encouragement can change a person's behaviour absolutely and make them achieve what they otherwise think is impossible. And that too, within the stretch targets of Fortescue, where we currently believe something's impossible, but we're all going to go for it and we're going to make it happen. And the leadership believes in us so much that they're prepared to take the risk on us, exactly like old Scotty took the risk on me as a little 8-year-old boy.
He would sort of, just by virtue of his ruthlessness on costs, his positiveness on innovation and new ways of doing things, the culture that developed even in the very early days was very, very different to a bureaucratic, highly systematised approach. We want you to take risks. We'll support you in taking risks. We expect you to make mistakes. Get on with it. It was great.
Turned around to me and he says, "Jim, if you say it will work, bugger them. It stays in the feasibility study." And I thought, what a boss, you know, that supports you to that extent when you're warning him that this is going to be a problem.
I was clearly allowing something to drag on a bit too long. And he came up and grabbed me, just went, "Get that," I'm not sure if I should say this. Sorry, we can edit it. "Get that BHP attitude out of your system, mate." He goes, "You're working for me now, right? It's fast, it's smart, it's clever, it's not money, it's not time, right?" You know, literally just grab and shake him, and it was, you know, calm down, man, you know, like, but it was all this kind of, this is what we need to succeed.
We've got to find a different way of doing this. And we've got to find a different way of doing this that's not going to cost more, it's going to cost less. We want you to replace the checkbook with your brains.
China wouldn't vendor finance these projects until Fortescue sold to China a decent chunk of the company. And Andrew replied in words to the effect that we're happy to sell a minority shareholding, 15, 20%, 25% of the company, but that's it. And Mr. Hurst said words to the effect that, no, we want 90%. but we'll accept 80% and you get free carriage for all the work you've put in to date. And of course, expletive deleted, the conversations were pretty short-lived.
When I went into the office, people were fearful that I'd come in with my head between my knees, you know, gnashing my teeth, almost tearful, or if not tearful. And I came in bouncy and happy and said, we've got a point to prove. Let's get on with it, team. This is going to be fun. High bar's got a little bit higher. Just means we're going to have even more fun beating it. Let's rock and roll. The worst thing which possibly happen here is that we fail. We're not going to fail for lack of trying. We're not going to fail for lack of a pretty solid plan B. And the office, so Graham and others have said, was completely amazed, and the pall of gloom disappeared in an instant. And we all got on with, okay, let's teach these people that we can do it without them.
We realised pretty early on that 20-25% of Christmas Creek was in seams less than 2 metres thick, 2 metres or less thickness. And conventional mining at the rate that we needed to mine would just mean too much dilution. I mean, the diggers are too big, they would take too much waste. We would have to, we'd basically destroy the ore grade by doing so.
Scott had this idea of a surface miner, so Scott and Jim hopped on a plane, went overseas to try and see these surface miners.
So I got John. John flew in, and when he wasn't sleeping, I kept him awake. And we saw this thing operating in this quarry. We've got photographs of it. And so John saw this and he said, if this machine will cut this, it'll cut 70 or 80% of our iron ore.
In theory they worked, but they didn't actually work because the pick wear was so fast that we'd be changing picks just constantly.
We did some extreme testing in granite. So granite's typically a very hard material which would have exceeded anything we were planning on milling.
We had sparks flying, we had this machine literally jumping a metre in the air. We destroyed it, it's never recovered, we ruined the machine.
We gathered a lot of data really quick, so it was more of a rapid destruction test.
So I spoke to all of the biggest tungsten carbide and pick manufacturers in the world, and their products weren't any better than what we were trialling. And so I decided to design my own. We worked out what was going on, and I designed this pick, and just by looking at the shape of it and so on, and I then got it manufactured in China. And so we were getting picks for half the price that were being offered, and they were lasting up to 12 times as long, which changed everything. It meant that these things could actually cut for long enough to make money, you know, rather than just constantly being down and changing picks and so on.
You know, there was a lot of things that went into it across the company, and that was certainly on the mining side, that was a key part as a solution to mining of the thin seams. Yeah.
The finance team were overseas, and they needed the deed signed within a matter of 48 hours, and we had to have aeroplanes and helicopters and stuff, and I flew all over the countryside from here, took off from Port Hedland early one morning to fly to Geological to get the first signature. We got to Geological and the landing gear didn't come down. The pilot said to us, we're going to have to go back to town. And I was like, absolutely can't happen. So we had to write a note on a piece of paper, put it in a jam tin and threw it out the window to the guys on the airstrip. And the note said, if our landing gear's down, wave your arms. So the landing gear was down, so the pilot came and landed in under full power so that if the gear did happen to fold up or whatever, he could take off. But it locked in and we landed. We got our first signature and picked up our first passenger, which was Billy Cadigan. He was from the Nyabali group, and he was a bit reluctant to sort of get in because he knew we'd had some problems with the aeroplane, but he did get in and escorted us back into town with the deeds and that sort of stuff.
Unfortunately, when the bond rating did come out from Standard & Poor's, and it was very late one night that we heard, so it would have been early Australian time, late New York time, the number or the rating that they were giving us was 2 levels below where we thought we were going to be. And I remember going to bed that night, and it was probably midnight, thinking, I'm dead in the water here. The company's dead in the water here. This is not going to happen. and everybody's going to walk away from this.
They wanted to go different to Moody's because they're competitors, and we were the sacrificial lamb in that stupid game. And secondly, they were being fundamentally lazy in looking at the strength of the proponent, not the strength of the project, in which case the mining industry could only be developed by the existing players. And I explained, if you propagate that process, the mining industry is going to die, and you will pay so much more, and your children will pay even so much more, and your grandchildren will pay an astronomical amount because you didn't rate mining companies' projects on the strength of the projects, but only on the strength of the company. And that means the whole world's mining industry, if left to you, will only be run by BHP, Rio and Vale. And they'll set prices at whatever they like and control supply because you established their monopoly. And that's, well, can you put any more money into the project? That's yes. If you give us a double B rating, we'll put in another 100 million. But you've got to say yes or no now. Because it's getting on. We're going to wake up tomorrow morning to the press that you gave us a single B and that this project's dusted. And so the lead guy said, done.
I woke up very early the next morning, maybe 6 o'clock, went straight down to breakfast, and there's Andrew sitting there looking very chipper and happy that he was feeling pretty good about the world. And I said, why are you so happy? This is not good. And he said, well, we've managed to get the bond rating that we wanted. And I said, what do you mean? And it turned out, as I discovered later, that he was up all night talking to Citigroup, talking to Standard & Poor's, and he managed to talk them up 2 levels during the evening. And I remember the Citigroup guy said, I've seen bonds talked up 1 level before, but 2 levels is just unheard of.
We went through $1 billion fairly quickly. We got up to 1.5 and then everything slowed up. And we were really quite nervous about whether we were going to get there.
And they were due to close the bond within an hour or 2. So Andrew managed to pull an ace out of the hat. He went to plan B. He called a certain person and he said, well, what do you need, Andrew? And Andrew said, I need you to guarantee that you'll put $150 million into this bond issue if we need it. And there was a silence that seemed like forever with our hearts beating hard because we knew we were playing our last card. And he came back after what I thought was forever, it was probably 10 seconds, and said, Andrew, I'd be happy to help you. So we looked at the Citigroup guys, they looked at us, and within minutes we were watching the bonds be posted and ramping up towards $2 billion. And within a couple of minutes we were ringing the bell because we were over the top. We were just over $2 billion.
Would have been about 3 in the morning, the text came through to say, we've done it, we've closed it. Just, and I mean, it was close. We just sort of rolled over that line, only just. And there was a real sense of euphoria, and you could get it across the line from the people in New York.
I literally could feel my heart inside my body jumping up and down at that moment.
$2 billion was about the maximum amount of money you could expect to raise in capital markets. So if we had a $5 billion project and only $2 billion available, we had a big problem.
It was extremely ambitious. The figure and the schedule was more than ambitious, but it sounded good. So I said, yeah, I think we could probably do it. I remember walking out from that interview and hearing Watling go around and says, hey, he thinks he can do it. God. I thought, oh no, I've made a mistake here. So.
Setting a totally unrealistic budget and a totally unrealistic schedule and getting everyone to believe you could do it before you'd figured out how you would do it, and then going about to do it. All the project management things we'd learned, all of experience kind of thrown out the window and saying, well, let's just take this thing on, and if we're smart enough and work well enough together and engage the right people and contractors, we can do it.
All of the difficulties and the problems that have been faced in those early years of Fortescue of trying to get access onto BHP's rail line and infrastructure really slowed the early development of the company. But once the decision was taken to build their own infrastructure and build their own railway line, that seemed to me when the company took off like a rocket.
Quite an amusing incident happened at a management meeting that Andrew chaired. And he said, okay, he said, you know, he said to me, will you be ready to produce in January? So I said, yes. I said, I'll be ready to produce in December if you need it. Okay, so we'll have the railway there in January. And so Watling turned around and said, April. So Andrew said, the railway line will be there in January, Alan. And Alan said, no, it will be there in April. And so Andrew said, I want it there in January. And Alan said, now remind me again, Andrew, how many railway lines is it you've built? Yeah, well, which was quite a good put down.
From what I saw, is the one he would have robust discussions with Andrew.
Did you witness any of these?
I have witnessed a few of those.
Did voices get raised?
They may have. I think we'll leave that one to history.
I know the man, and I know the man in the best of his days and in the worst of his days. And I, for one, would be certainly happy to go and stick my oar in the water with him again if he had some extraordinary project to do. So, you know, there aren't better people out there, the likes of which I don't think you'll see again, to be honest.
The one that I just absolutely was shitting myself about was it was a Aboriginal heritage issue. There was a protection that was applied to an area that we wanted to put a railway line through. And there are only a certain number of places across the state that had this very high level of protection.
If we couldn't get a railway line through Woodstock-Abydos, like indeed BHP had theirs, we'd have had to have gone around it, which would have been another set of applications, put the project back 2 years, and we'd have gone broke. The bureaucrats were saying, look, Minister, it's not the trains which will cause the problem. It'll be the explosions as they clear the lines to make way for the trains. I said, well, we can do blasting, which is crack blasting, which does not explode. So there's not a snowflake's chance in hell, sir, that you're correct. So I said, Minister, each time they go to blast, I will personally stand in front of the carving. So if I happen to be wrong, I will get hit and not the carving. Do we have a deal? And she said, if you can commit to that, we have a deal.
I remember a banker who was clearly one of the guys that went to the BHP Rio kind of roundtable analyst kind of meetings and was wanting to stay in with these guys, getting up and saying, I'd be quite happy to lay across the tracks between Cloudbreak and Port Hedland on X date, which is the date that we said would complete it, because I know there's no chance I'll get run over by a train. So I made a poster which I spread around all of the sites with a picture of a banker lying across the track saying everyone to run over a banker or something. And I think it's fairly positive, you know.
And everyone was hell-bent on running him over.
Yeah, we had a picture of a railway line with this guy on it, and we think, you know, bugger you.
Port Hedland Airport became an emergency landing zone for the injured. The mine workers who survived a nightmare, a Category 4 storm packing winds of up to 275 kilometres per hour. They knew the cyclone was coming, but never expected this.
Our response to this dreadful tragedy which is unfolding in a part of the world so dear to us, and which meant the world to us, but we were so remote from and couldn't help. Our response was to gather into a circle and pray.
Oh, look, everyone was really upset, obviously. I mean, lives were lost and the family was, you know, broken, really, because it was a family, so it wasn't just the families that were affected, but certainly everybody felt it.
That was the worst thing I've ever had to do. I mean, in terms of
dealing with that situation. I mean, the entire management was in America. We weren't set up for anything. I mean, nobody expected it. We had to set up a makeshift incident room.
Andrew was incredible. So when the news came through, I mean, he was obviously devastated, but he went into action. And we all, we were overseas at the time, and we came straight back to Perth, and his first concern was for the families. He made an enormous effort and spent a lot of time talking to the families and making sure that they were coping with the situation.
I think it was the daughter of a woman who'd been killed. Keep phoning us up in the incident room saying, could you please just tell me what's happened to my mother? And we kind of knew, but we couldn't tell her. Why couldn't we tell her? Because we didn't know for sure who it was, but she just kept phoning up and saying, please, 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 just, tell me what's happened to my mother. So, that was the worst bit for me. That was very tough.
And they're tough times, but you get through them as a team, as a family, I guess. And to see those people stand up and try and make things right. To see Andrew stand there and take ownership and try and be a part of making things better is quite compelling. It makes you proud to be a part of that.
I remember one guy was at a very grave risk of never walking again, and he reached up from his bed and he could see tears flooding down my face, and he was crying too. And he said, "What are you going to do, Andrew?" And I said, "Look, I just don't know what I can do. I just feel, as close as I've ever felt to giving up." And he said, "You must never give up. If you give up, all our injuries mean nothing." But that was a very, very tough, poignant and evolving moment, and it gave me enormous certainty.
The biggest extra mile that will stay with me forever, as you know, is our cyclone. Just how everyone came together as a family, it was just amazing to get all our people out and how everything was followed through afterwards. And I think that to me was the glue that made me realise I'm in a safe place.
I rock up to work on the railway. It wasn't working yet, still in construction. The original operational readiness, and day one, ready to work on the railway. And they called me aside and said, "Ron, you're going to be working on tugboats." Tugboats. They said, "Yeah, you'll be working on tugboats with a guy by the name of Barry Knight, who was one of the original geologists." And the first time I met Barry, I said, "Barry, how you going, Ron D'Agostino? We're working on tugboats. I'm looking forward to learn a lot about tugboats from you." He looked at me and said, "Shit." You can edit that. He said, "Shit, what are you talking about? I thought you were the expert on tugboats." So for me, that is one of the true essence of Fortescue. It's all about getting things done. Empowerment. You don't have to be an expert. Just give guys a go, and they'll do it. They'll find the resources and get it done. Then 5 years later, they came to me and said, "Ron, what do you know about rail?" I looked around. You guys got to be joking. Is this a joke? And now, Ron, we want you to go down and run the railway. We did hire you 5 years ago to do that. So here I am 5 years later at Fortescue Rail.
The moment when the first product came out of the process plant and off the stacker at Cloudbreak and fell onto the ground, I was standing, about 50 or 60 metres away from the stacker. It was just absolute relief. It was just magnificent.
The first ore on ship, that was an amazing moment. The first train, there's so many, I can't really... He got every single milestone would make Andrew really excited.
2 days that I will take to my grave with me was first ore on train. It's iconic, it's a bit early to call it iconic, but it's definitely a postcard photo of Andrew Forrest on the front of the train, waving the Australian flag, this joyous spirit in his face. They're seminal moments. And that was just such a proud moment. It was fantastic.
When the first ship came in to port, and we were there with all our family, the 5 of us were on the front of that ship as it came into the port. Our son got to pull the horn on the ship as we came in. And then all these horns just went off in Port Hedland. And it was the most incredible experience because it was just like everyone was cheering for this first ship of Fortescue's, and we were all there with just tears running out. So more tears of joy, I think, than tears of frustration Andrew's had. You know, that elation was incredible.
Go Australia!
Standing there while the ore comes off the end of it and realising that
Thank you, boys!
it was only 5 years before that, or that we had actually decided that there'd be a Fortescue Metals group.
The back end of this, you stand back far enough and take a deep breath and say the company built this for $2 billion odd. It's a magnificent feat. So there were issues that can always be done better, but the final result was amazing.
Oh, nothing short of a miracle. There isn't another example anywhere in the world of a resources company starting from absolutely nothing, one person with an idea, no money, no iron ore, in 2003, really, building something so quickly as a team of people in that way. And so it is something that Australia should be very proud of.
It was a cultural journey of which we're all very proud. And while at times we slipped and tripped and we never stopped climbing, we never stopped getting better at it. And we never will. And I think that's the biggest strength Fortescue has, is to keep the target out there and to keep going forward towards it, because the satisfaction in achieving it is one of the best feelings in the world.
I said, Andrew, Peter here. He said, yeah, mate. I said, we won, Andrew. He said, what? Nicola, come and listen. I said, we won, Andrew, we've won. Won everything. 5-0, everything.
Everyone, I mean, we had thousands of shareholders. Everyone saw straight through that it was Chinese playing hardball in order to get control of an Australian project. But only ASIC, who saw that I was a high-profile person, someone which they could really pin a scalp to the top of the door if they were successful, only ASIC wanted to believe that somehow this was some grand conspiracy.
This was a great day for us, and there was a lot of celebration around because it was a fantastic victory in one sense, but it was also getting rid of the lead out of the saddlebags that had been sort of hanging around in the background for so long.
Not been a more important day. I knew how much it meant. It's not been a more important day in my life as a lawyer than that one.
We clearly made a mistake, and the mistake wasn't to let the people go. That was just a tragedy, but that was what had to happen. The mistake was that the people were there in the first place.
When you're at the top of the food chain, you've got no one else to blame, only yourselves. We'd allowed our organisation to grow too fat, to aspire to most principles of our culture, but not the one which would protect us in a downturn, which is frugality, and we took our eyes off our original vision to be one of the lowest cost producers in the world.
In the situation we were in, you could not say, because of the culture, we have to hang on to all the people here, because that's just suicide. No, we had to say, you have to make the adjustments to the organisation that allow you to survive given the market conditions we're in.
Our long-term survival is all about being the lowest cost producer. So we can never afford to have waste in the organisation, and we need to be looking every day to see how we can do things more efficiently and for lower cost.
Basically what it does is engages with the community and gets candidates to come forward or people to apply, and we take people that have had absolutely no experience or some people that have had some experience and put them through various different training courses.
My most moving Fortescue experience was a day at one of our VTech graduations when two of the young women that had gone through our VTech training course stood up and talked about the impact that the VTech training and the jobs that came with it had had on their lives. These two young women were completely lost and at odds with the world. And it was only through the training that they received at VTech and then going on to get a job with us in our operations that turned their lives around.
Most of my 20s I spent in jail, pretty much all of them.
I was on heroin for 15 years, hooked, absolutely hooked. I was useless and on the welfare, I was struggling to feed me kids. I got 6 kids. And
when the kids asking me, well, when are you going to go to work, Dad? And it hurt. Big lump was in my throat. Didn't know what to say to them.
And if I could go back, I'd really stick to schooling because it helped me in more ways than one at the moment now. Yeah.
I just thought, stuff it. One day I thought, I've got to get off my arse and do something for my family, my own family, and earn some respect back. And
the day I wanted to get off Centrelink was the day I found out about this the course through VTech.
Because I went to VTech to enrol in there, started my business certificate 2 in business at Palma. It was, I'm getting up in the morning and going to do some study. I do want to get a job at the end of this, so.
Sometimes there's 3 or 4 generations that have been on welfare all of their life, and I don't know, they probably think they can't get out of it. And I was thinking along the same lines, thinking, that must be it. We're just here to stay drunk all the time and drink our lives away, and there's no hope, but there's hope, all right.
My focus ended up being on my children, and then their children after them. What are they going to think of me if I don't do anything now? And I just got onto it, got a job.
Being employed means so much pride in yourself. It just brings so much pride in yourself.
And I can't even describe the way I feel inside. I think my smile tells it all.
So working really does make me feel good about myself. Yeah?
I feel good. I feel really good about what I do and what I have achieved to get there.
Never give up, and no matter how bad you think things are, just keep on going.
Things do get better, and it's up to you to make it what you want it to be.
But live a happy life. That's all I want is for me to live a happy life and grow old.
Just gotta get up and yes, have a crack. Red hot go.
And we don't want to be left behind. We've probably been left behind too much. We'll be the sleeping giants. Us Aboriginal people.
Scary, exciting, dangerous, thrilling, anything you care to mention.
You did want to achieve things for yourself. You did want to, individual people wanted to create things because everyone around them there were all these successes going on.
As soon as I walked inside the office, I can remember this feeling of excitement and energy, and I've never felt that. And that was the inspiration that made me follow through. I think it was that energy that it projected.
The minute you come onto a Fortescue site, you're family. So it doesn't matter whether you are a third-party contractor, whether you're black, white or brindle, whether you're in a same-sex relationship. It makes no difference to me or to anyone. family on this side of the gate is what it's about, and that is looking after your mate. We call it our brother's keeper.
One of the things that I notice is that people join Fortescue from the other companies and they just can't stop smiling. And I think the reason they can't stop smiling is that they are all absolute specialists in their own fields. They've all done what they do for years, and suddenly they're in an environment that says, tell us what you know. Don't just do it the way we want you to do it. Tell us how you would do it to make it better. And they can bring all their years of experience and training to actually do something really, really well.
I suppose I have the benefit of coming in behind some of the people and what they've created. I'd like to think what they've created is great, but I actually think part of the fun of the story of Fortescue is what's to come. Because when you start to build and generate the cash flow that we're going to build, the opportunities that opens up for individuals within the company, for the company itself, the fun's just starting.
We are completely committed to achieving our 155 million tonne expansion, and we have opportunities beyond that. But for now, we have all of the plans, and we're mobilised to do the work, and that work's well underway. We want to achieve this not just for our shareholders, but also for all of our employees, everybody in the Fortescue family, the communities that we operate in, the Indigenous people that we employ, the government that we pay taxes and royalties to, our customers who are looking for the reliable and competitive supply of iron ore. And all of that drives me to say we've got to keep doing better. We have to keep improving our organisation so that we can touch more people and make their lives better.
If you start with an attitude, there's just no way I'm going to let this problem beat me, even if it knocks me on my bum for 48 times. I'm going to get up off my backside and I'm going to have another crack at it until eventually I defeat it. And that was the attitude we all had to have from 2003 onwards. And I believe we've still got it now. Those leaders today know that, listen, failure is just so not an option. We have to succeed.
One other value that I'd like to mention specifically, and that is never, ever give up. And I think the early images of this were around that pelican with the frog in its mouth and the frog grabbing the pelican's neck so it couldn't swallow the frog. And I think that epitomises the way we do things at Fortescue. We'll find another way and we'll never, ever give up on achieving that.